Guys, we've done it. Helldivers no longer has forced PlayStation Network account linking. So, here's tweeted by PlayStation a little under 2 hours ago. Helldiver fans, we've heard your feedback on the Helldivers 2 account linking update, the May 6th update, yeah? Which would have required Steam and PlayStation Network account linking for new players and all current players beginning May 30th. Will not be moving forward. Fantastic. We are still learning what's best for PC players, and your feedback has been invaluable. Thanks again for your continued support of Helldivers 2, and we'll keep you updated on future plans. We have done it, boys. Helldivers 2 will no longer have forced account linking to PlayStation Network for absolutely no fucking reason. The only reason for this is so that fucking Sony and PlayStation to keep our account information, which is just incredibly silly. And you know, it's, it's kind of like just gonna pat ourselves on the back a little bit. Good job. Everyone kind of rallied together against like straight up just corporations doing evil shit. Because in case you didn't know, if we go on to SteamDB, Helldivers is now the most negatively reviewed paid game. There are only two games with more negative reviews, but they're both free to play, so they don't really fall under the same category. Helldivers 2 has more negative reviews than Dota 2, has more negative reviews than like Call of Duty, has more the Warzone, right? Has more negative reviews than Overwatch 2. Remember the stinker that was Overwatch 2 on Steam after all the bad stuff that happened, but everyone rallied to negative review? Remember, Overwatch 2 is a free game. Helldivers 2 has almost double the amount of negative reviews as Overwatch. So as you can tell, people kind of rallied together. I will say though, if we go back to this post, we look at the fucking first comment. Can we you know, realize that, we've done it, we won, but let's tone back. We need, because it's good that we rallied against the bad that that was Sony in this scenario, but it's also important that not only do we rally against the bad, but we also support the good that these companies do. These companies need to understand that we are willing to rally against them when they do bad things, but we're also willing to support them, and we will be happy when they do good things, right? Because one thing we need to do is to remove negative reviews first and foremost, right? Why is it so important that we remove the negative reviews? It's because these companies need to realize that staying silent and not doing anything isn't the right course of action. The fact that players will respond when the companies actually do good things, need to understand this, which kind of leans into a fact that I'm not the most happy about. If you go onto the Steam page for Helldivers 1, remember, Helldivers 1 never had this issue of the forced PlayStation linking, right? Helldivers 1, great game, has very positive reviews, as you can tell. But if you look at the charts, it's been having a huge amount of negative reviews recently, to the point where it's mixed instead of just it's very positive that it's always been at. And if we look at all the negative reviews, never Sony, never again, Helldivers Unite, no divers left behind. These are the kind of reviews that were fine on Helldivers 2 because that's where the actual issue was at. But let's not review bomb something that had no issues. There were no issues with Helldivers 1. There were no issues with Magica, another one of their games, by the way. Again, remember, I would like to point out Magica wasn't even, let me get out of here. Magica 1 wasn't even published by Sony. Has nothing to do with Sony or PlayStation. But even this game, as we can see, look at the recent past 3 days, it's been having negative reviews. And some of these reviews are like real, like the game crashing. But if we scroll down, we're gonna see do not buy the game. They've sold, like, again, this type of review is fine on Helldivers 2. This type of review is fine on Helldivers 2. Again, although I will say, remember, this is a publisher issue, not an issue with the actual game studio. But It's fine to leave these reviews on Helldivers 2 to show and rally against what they were doing. But why are we leaving these reviews on Magica? Right? So again, people, no, don't just delete your negative reviews on Helldivers 2 because again, they actually listened. So which is why you should change your reviews. Make sure you also remove your negative reviews on Magica and Helldivers 1. These games did nothing. This game did nothing. There was no issues with these games. Magica wasn't even published by Sony. So I don't know why people are leaving negative reviews. Which kind of like leads into what I kind of saw the CEO of Arrowhead Studios, aka Helldivers 2. And he was also the creative director. As you can see from what he was talking about, he was responding to some civil questions on Twitter because again, he was receiving a lot, and when I say a lot, I mean a lot of hate online, which again wasn't really his fault. But as you can see, they signed the contract for Helldivers 2 8 years ago. Didn't specify details about account linking. But again, the publishers always have some weight to throw whenever you're actually developing the game, because again, they're the ones who are sponsoring the money so that they can actually make the game. And during development, Sony wanted PlayStation Network account linking, even for PC players. They discussed it. It was deemed as important for PlayStation to have it for an online title. I discussed it and it was deemed important probably means that Sony they probably protested a little bit, but Sony put their foot down and said no. And then the game came out. The game was way more popular than they could have predicted. The game exploded on launch. Again, servers died because again, you couldn't get into the game on launch because they just didn't have enough server space because they didn't expect this many people to buy the game. And then they just cut off account linking as well as the Galactic War stats just to be able to get people into the game. And then they just didn't re-enable it later because they didn't want to explode the servers. And then Sony eventually forced the requirement back on them. And that's kind of like where we are now with all the backlash. But again, this wasn't the fault of Arrowhead Studios. They they signed a publishing deal with Sony because they needed the funds and the money and the extra weight that Sony has in order to actually make a successful game. They wouldn't they had nothing to do with this. It was forced upon them and they had to listen. And a lot of people don't understand that because these developers have been receiving so much hate online. But obviously, again, all the hate against Sony was completely fair. There's so many reasons why you wouldn't want Sony to have your account information. For example, I don't know, Sony having data breaches. Sony has had a history of having data breaches. It's not that surprising. Like it, it's not that surprising for any company to have data breaches simply because of all the moving parts. But again, Sony's had their fair share of data breaches, and it's very reasonable why you wouldn't want to have Sony to have your information. Not even just that, like you have to think about why does Sony want your information in the first place? It's because, well, frankly, in some way they are trying to profit off of it. When Google has your information, they use that to send you targeted ads so that they can make more money off ads. Why would Sony want it? Because hey, you have getting a bunch of information from your consumer base to understand what they want is like very profitable when they want to make more IPs. So we should be happy that Helldivers made the change. It's a very important change. Some people are talking about how, this change doesn't do everything, right? Do not prematurely reverse your negative reviews. There's still 177 countries restricted from Helldivers 2. And while this is true, the reason why the reason why these countries were restricted from buying Helldivers 2 was because these countries, um, you couldn't sign up for PSN, PlayStation Network, in these countries. So this was done by Steam to protect the consumers. Again, If you lived in one of these countries and you tried to refund Helldivers 2, Steam let you refund the game because you couldn't play the game because Steam actually cares about the consumers, which is why they put these blockades in place. But now that Helldivers 2 is no longer forcefully linked to PlayStation, this isn't an issue anymore. And people need to understand that this won't be an issue anymore. Steam will go back through and undo this change so that if you live in one of these 177 countries, you're gonna be able to play Helldivers 2. And that kind of leaves us to where we're at now. Please, for the love of God, remove your negative reviews. We won, but we need them to understand that while we do rally against the bad, we are also going to support the good. And support the good is what we got to do. And how do we do that? Remove your negative reviews. Please. Please.